Welcome back. It's a campaign promise that was not kept, a presidential vow that wasn't fulfilled. As a senator, President Benigno Aquino III signed the Freedom of Information Bill. As a presidential candidate, he pledged to make it his administration's priority. But now the chief executive is taking a more cautious stand, saying too much freedom is simply dangerous.
Iba pa rin yung by force of law, no? So, that would be, I think, the more complete truth. Pero kailangan ko pag-aralan ako pwede doon sa suggestion.
Magiging priority po yun ng administrasyon ninyo?
Yes, ma'am.
Even before assuming the highest post of the land, President Benigno Aquino III has pledged his support for the Freedom of Information Bill.
Yung certified urgent po, kung babasahin natin sa ligang batas, may mga alituntunan na kailangan sundin. Kailangan ko pa i-konsulta yung mga abogado. Kung hindi mo pwedeng kursunada ko lang certified urgent na, meron mo talagang requirements.
However, as months passed by, he seems to be singing a different tune. The FOI bill was not in President Aquino's list of priority bills. The president has not certified the FOI bill as urgent, saying it may not be wise to reveal every little detail or raw information to the public. There are also matters of national security and privacy that need to be addressed.
Having a Freedom of Information Act sounds so good and noble, but at the same time, and Mr. Pascual, I think you'll notice that here in this country, there's a tendency of getting information and not really utilizing it for the proper purposes.
With less than 2 years to go before the current Congress closes, does the FOI bill have a chance of being passed?
We are adhering, in the absence of a law, adhering to the constitutional provision that the citizens are entitled to information that will affect their decisions. The difficulty is actually the devil in the details. So where does it help the interests of the people, not the government, but the people, and where can it inflict harm?
Will the Aquino administration stay true to its commitment of openness, transparency, and accountability?
Our system of laws say you have freedom of speech, but the freedom of speech that's a guarantee does not allow you, for instance, to say there's a fire in a movie theater.
And will the people truly benefit from a law on freedom of information?
When I was a kid, I was told absolute freedom is the greatest actual infringement.
With us in this part of the program, Undersecretary Manolo Quezon of the Presidential Communications Group. We also have Assistant Ombudsman Maribeth Padios from the Office of Legal Affairs. And we're also joined by Professor Prospero De Vera of the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance. And we still have with us Attorney Nepomuceno Malaluan, convener of the Right to Know Right Now Network. We were supposed to have a representative from the Defense Department in this forum, but they couldn't make it due to an urgent appointment. Here's the statement of Undersecretary Pio Lorenzo Batino. Undersecretary Batino says the Department of National Defense posits that in general, public documents and transactions must be made accessible to the public for purposes of transparency and governance. However, the department is also of the position that state secrets, specifically sensitive security and defense matters, must be kept confidential. In this regard, it is posited that sensitive security and defense matters should be exempt from accessibility to the public. I guess no issues there. As far as our advocates are concerned, right, Attorney Nep. But first, let me ask, good evening. Thank you all for joining us in this part of the forum. Let me first ask, of course, Yusek Manolo, given that everyone wants to ask, where is Pinoy in all of this discussion on the FOI bill?
You know, I want to start, first of all, by taking exception to the introduction. That maybe this is the problem that happens when, for example, we're talking to some of the advocates. If you notice, the president has not gone back on his beliefs that the benefit that the law would confer, but he has been very transparent, malinaw at ginagawa niyang malinaw kung ano yung mga dapat pag-usapan, sinong dapat kausapin, at ano yung mga kailangan i-resolba para maipasa ang isang Freedom of Information Act. I'll give you another example. Malinaw dun sa usapan with the members of the House and the Senate, what has everyone agreed on? In general, the exceptions, yun nga, importante yung salitang yun exceptions. Because yung iiral na patakaran ay may karapatan tayong malaman kung anong ginagawa ng pamahalaan at ano yung mga pumapasok sa desisyon. If you look at what media has always wanted to know in the investigations of Alan Peter in the Senate or in the House, it was always follow the money trail. And therefore, if most of us were to talk, those of us who came from the media, those of you who are still in the media, you want to know where the money is going, right? And I'll give you an example how I'm very glad of what Alan Peter said. This is an example of crossing party lines to give credit where credit is due. You have the DBM. You can now go find out exactly where his funds are going, where Erin's funds are going, and it's right there. This was not available in the past. You can go to the Department of Public Works and Highway. Dati, ito yung pinaka-corruption-prone agency. For all the projects going on, you can know status niya, delayed ba o hindi, magkano ang ginagastos, and that sort of thing. Ang medyo nakakagulat dito, and this was done with very little fanfare, it's out there. Some enterprising members of media know about it. Every time na nagkakaroon ng forum or some sort of event, pinag-uusapan namin ito. And people's eyes glaze over at parang nano-nosebleed ang iba. But again, why am I pointing this out? Hindi naman sa nag-aangat ng sariling bangko, although I think this is very significant and verifiable because you don't have to take my word for it. Pwede kayong pumunta sa mga URL na ito kung mag-aaksa kayo ng panahon para buklatin yung mga datos na nandun. But it shows us what an FOI is and is not. It requires you to do your part. Kahit nandun yung impormasyon, as Alan Peter said, kung hindi mo naman, hindi ka magtsatsaga, hindi mo pag-aaralan, at just because the number is there, nakalatag yung numero, hindi ibig sabihin it will make sense. I mean, the difficulty, I mean, one reason, for example, Alan and I met in our office in Malacanang to discuss this bill in October. Nothing has happened since then. Why? Budget. And you know what a nosebleed process that is. Just because nakalatag ang numero doesn't mean it's... Now, what is an FOI? The FOI is basically the rules. Paano makukuha ang impormasyon? Ano ang pwedeng makuha? Kailan? Sino magdidesisyon? And that sort of thing. Bakit medyo may mga concerns ang ibang tao? Bakit hindi agad-agad nagpipirmahan dito? Because, as the President said, the devil is in the details. The big questions are actually the easy questions. For example, kung alam mo na magkakagera dahil ilalabas mo ang isang secret communique from your embassy abroad about some sort of situation, no one in their responsible mind would actually insist on that coming out. May nakatayang buhay. You would not put your soldiers' lives in danger by saying, sabihin, i-broadcast nyo naman kung saan sila papunta at sinong dadakipin nila, anong oras para alam namin, hindi ba? That's easy, actually. The details come, and the President has been always very clear about it. It's in those little things, and Alan and I were talking about it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. When you and I, let's say, are talking, like sa newsroom, hindi ba? If everything discussed in the newsroom were broadcast, what would that do to the credibility of ABS-CBN? What would that do to your credibility? What would that do to the effectivity of getting the story out? The same would apply. The President has been very clear and categorical about yung mga examples na ginagamit niya. And these are, whether you like it or not, kailangan talagang pag-usapan. For very good example was, if you are sitting around in a meeting about the national budget. Someone comes in, ma'am comes in and says, sir, we have a raw intel report about meron yatang may SARS. Now, unless the rules are clear to everyone, do you have a potential na may magsasabi, narinig ni Popoy, di ba? And then he will leak it out to someone. Unless it's very clear to everyone what the ground rules are for processing information like that, how handling it and that sort of thing, it can endanger the public. Yung example nga of shouting fire in a movie theater. Now, it may be you and I may be able to say, madali lang naman yan, obvious naman sa tao. But remember, katulad ng sinasabi dun sa ibang examples, may mga USEC, ASEC, may mga assistants, may mga waiter, and everything. That has to all be clarified in the process.
Yusek, let me backtrack a bit and cite what the President himself said in one of the sound bites that we used. Of course, there is no question that this government has been trying to be transparent. You all have those websites that your office has put up to show the transparency of government processes. But at the same time, the President himself said there's nothing like institutionalizing certain
and precisely, yun nga ang question, yung nagbabacktrack. He recognizes, remember, the reason I took exception, of course, I have to defend the President, right? But I do think it's very valid. He said we should have it. He had voted for it at the time. Any congressperson, any senator you talk to, the problem is the clock starts at zero again pag may bagong kongreso. And everyone believes, just like, for example, I strongly believe that there are improvements that could be made sa kasunduan nila. The one discussion that for example, Erin and Nepo and I have had was precisely over, we believe the idea of an information commission is useful. This is very different from what their previous bills had. Although not so different from even earlier versions, kasi 10 taon na nga ito,
right,
diba?
Right.
Now, in the past, there was an idea that you'd have an information commission, then it became ombudsman na lang. Now, this shows you how these things get enriched dahil nag-uusap kayo. For example, Alan Peter said, okay, you can have your information commission, so you have a referee na sasabihin, ito ba covered o hindi covered, para ba't gumalaw lang yun. But, ang takot ng mga proponents naman, kung lahat nasa kamay ng ehekutibo ang magdedesisyon kung may kakasuhan ba o hindi, baka makukuntsaba yung mga yon. Right. So, he said, keep the filing of actual punitive cases in the hands of the ombudsman. We're open to that. So now this will be discussed.
We will go into the details of what the President actually wants, or what Malacanang wants in terms of provisions in the FOI bill. But let me ask Attorney De Vera, Professor De Vera, well, your thoughts on the President's attitude from his former position up to this point in time.
You know, Linda, the problem with following the logic of Manolo's arguments is that you can cite 1,000 different reasons why not to pass a bill and put specific instances, and that is the best way to kill a bill. Number one, I think it misses the whole point about why you need transparency and access to information. We should separate leaders from policies. Bonus na lang that we have a Pinoy who is transparent. But you still need a fundamental policy to be put in place. Because, you know, the same arguments can be raised during GMA's time on why the FOI should not move. Instances of national security, the same issues can be raised there.
They do not change.
They do not
the same
change.
concerns.
Yeah, so what we are missing is that you have to put a policy in place and ask and require public officials to implement the law correctly. It doesn't mean that because you have a president who is transparent, you can postpone FOI. Because if you keep on postponing it, and the next president comes in who is a GMA reincarnated, then where are we? I think that is what is being missed. Second, you cannot craft a perfect law. All policies fundamentally are products of historical periods. Kaya nga mayroong amendments. We have to put the law in place and make sure that we learn from experience and amend it. You know, the biggest tragedy of this whole thing, of this whole FOI problem that we have, is that with all our experience with martial law and the secret decrees, with our experience with Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, refusal to put out the NBN-ZTE scam. My question is, why is it taking us forever to realize that this is urgent and fundamental? You know, other countries in the world who had experiences like this, that we used to thumb our noses at, like South Africa, after the period of apartheid, they passed their Freedom of Information law 2 decades ago. We're falling way behind other countries. I think that is the point. Because the concerns of Manolo are important, but they can be addressed by amendments and specific provisions.
Speaking of concerns that Yusek Manolo has raised, Attorney Nep, hindi ba kayo, are these even the positions that you have taken? Ibig sabihin, are you even opposed to the exceptions that they want or the clarifications that they want insofar as the discussion is concerned?
Well, the study group, in fact, had an opportunity to craft the amendments based on those concerns, and they have done so. The question now, as far as I know, when it was presented in the Senate as a version, as a Malacanang version with these concerns, and in fact we are agreeable to many of these changes. The qualification was that it did not have the endorsement yet of the president. But our position now really is that to the extent that those concerns have been addressed by this version, then sana wala nang balakid sa pagpapatuloy nito, and precisely because there should no more be an impediment, the fact that it is taking too long tells us that something is wrong in the picture. In other words,
what do you think is wrong in the picture?
I think what is wrong in the picture is that, as mentioned, this can go on forever. These small things. But may I respond also? We have been shown from the DBM, and we are happy that the Department of Budget Secretary Butch Abad has been a major exponent of transparency in this government. But you visit other websites. They've shown some websites here. If you do research, for example, on the liabilities of, let's say, PISAM, which has grown to 16 billion, I'm sure that it would take a JCPC, the Judicial Congressional Power Commission, to put this out. But if you are an ordinary citizen, if you visit that website, you would only see some headings and some data. It is not going into the kind of institutionalization which, as Professor De Vera said, we need so much. And the other flaw in that argument is that if it is so transparent, anyway, and so why resist this bill? If it, in other words, yun lang ang nahihirapan kaming maunawaan. And in fact, Yusek Manolo himself would I think concede that we dialogued with them for
so many times.
For so many times.
Let me walk you through so you know where everyone is on this. So the first thing that the House had to do, marami mga versions, they had to consolidate it into one. At the time that they were doing this, we were also studying the different versions post 14th Congress as well in other countries. Then we had a series of meetings with Sila Nepo and then with Erin, and that's where we started making proposals. Every time we would make a proposal, the first decision that had to be made was, magpo-propose ba ang Malacanang ng sarili niyang bill, or will everyone work on the Erin bill as the source document? So I think it was a good thing that everyone agreed we will work with the Erin bill. Then we talked to Nepo, and I think we were very forthright about ito yung mga concerns na inilatag ng Pangulo. This is how we intend to address it. What do you think? Some acceptable to them, some not acceptable to them, some subject to more discussions. I'm pretty confident that at this point, there is a pretty good, clear meeting of the minds between people like myself, Erin, and Nepo. Ang medyo nainip sila Nepo because gusto na nila yung basbas ng presidente para dun sa, lalo na sa LEDAC. But at the same time, remember, may proseso rin na dadaan sa Senado. At that point, we were called to a committee meeting, Senator Honasan and Senator Cayetano, and then we also met with Senator Cayetano, and at that point, he had further revisions that might have removed some of the other discussions. Now, what step is left after that? Popoy has a point in that, for example, even if Nepo and Erin and I will say okay kami dito, siyempre kukumbinsin mo ang Pangulo. Not only that, but lahat ng mga nakapaligid at yung mga nakapaligid sa mga nakapaligid at yung mga nakapaligid sa mga nakapaligid sa mga nakapaligid.
Concentric
course,
circles
yes,
ito.
of course. And the thing is, you have to be very, very frank that there are different kinds
Views.
of concerns, okay? Let us assume that we all agree na this is not a law that a crook would like, okay? And that therefore this is a law that is harmful to crooks. Fine. But there are other people who are not crooks who are just worried because the tendency look, when I was in media, I was very frank. My concern with the FOI is wag niyo isipin na maganda yung record keeping ng pamahalaan. And alam mo, there might be cases where jahe din ng pamahalaan na ang dami mo palang gustong hingin sa kanila, wala kami.
So meaning we need the infrastructure to support this
yes,
law as far as government
but then
record keeping is concerned.
Popoy will argue na that can be an eternal struggle to try to build that.
Okay.
But as far as I'm concerned, if the rules were spelled out, if everyone had no illusions about what it is and what it is not, it will move it faster. Of course, but at the same time, ma-frustrate din sila.
We will go back later to the timetable of the bus, but let's bring in the Ombudsman. What is the position of the Ombudsman, Attorney Padios?
We have stated certain observations with respect to the
FOI bill.
Proposed legislation. And one of that would be on the matter of the exceptions. Specifically on the non-application of the exception to the authority to withhold information to Congress.
Konting attorney, medyo legal gobbledygook. Ano ibig sabihin nun insofar as the bill and the exception is concerned?
There is a particular provision there in the proposed legislation which would require the Ombudsman, in that case, to divulge confidential information.
Okay.
Pursuant to a legislative act of Congress. But we deem it that it will destroy the independence of the Ombudsman in the sense that the Constitution has granted us certain powers and it has even given us the function and the duty to publicize matters if the circumstances would warrant and with due prudence.
So meaning may institutional reservations in the sense that it might affect your own processes in the Ombudsman as far as your independence is concerned. So did the Ombudsman come up with a counter proposal that might have been incorporated, let's say, in the Malacanang version?
We have sent our position paper and we have also recommended for a deletion of one of the exceptions there, and we provided for a supposed alternative to that.
Okay, in the bill of Senator Cayetano, and I don't know if this has already been updated or removed, if you are denied by a government agency access to any information that you might have requested, pupunta ka doon sa Ombudsman. At kumbaga magiging appeals board ang Ombudsman. What's your position on this matter?
Prior to the substitute bill, the Ombudsman there would seem that we don't have the exclusive jurisdiction because we will consider the fact that for offenses, because of the denial of the request, it would be in the nature of a criminal or an administrative offense.
Kasi may penalty, na kapag ka nag-deny ang isang government agency ng isang request, pwede siyang ma-penalize, makasuhan criminally.
Yes, criminally and administratively. And the moment that it will be an administrative offense, then the Civil Service Commission could validly take cognizance of the case.
Okay, let me go back to the all-important bus. But first, before we go to the timetable, Professor De Vera, how important is the President's, you've heard the two lawmakers, they said they have the numbers, but how important is the President's blessings or push for the FOI bill? And does it even have to be considered at this point?
Oh, very, very important. If you trace the history of freedom of information laws in other countries, they've always been spearheaded by a president. Not only in showing signals of support, but basically in mobilizing